Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for part 8 of about a 32-part series as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. We've got a comments section, we've got a So What Happens, which is a recap of the reading. Then we've got a Lit Crit section and a writer's notes section for this chapter of the book. So let's get into things. Seagull Rock Squawk comments, very fun commentary. Thank you. I've been working on it. I've been trying to improve my fun, and I'm doing what I can. Does that work? That's not fun? That's not fun. Scooby Doodah Yeehaw comments, get back to the It series, and that is not pertinent to this, but I'm going to address it on the show anyway, because you've made it 8 videos into this series. Between you and me, not a whole lot of people left here. Between you and me, I had planned to get back into the It series this year, but what I want to do with it is I want to do something special. I want to do what I plan to call the Black Label series. And what I want to do with that is, so there's a whole, look, if a 30-minute video finds its way onto YouTube on this channel, I don't do a whole lot of editing. Obviously, we're here. Screens backwards. There's no pictures on screen, no words on screen, no intro, none of that. I don't do a whole lot of editing, but if a 30-minute video comes across YouTube, there's about 5 hours of labor that goes behind it. I got to read this stuff. I got to take notes on this stuff. Got to verify the notes that I've got on the stuff. Got to try and see maybe if there's something else someone else has said about the stuff. All of these levels of things before even pressing the record button. So there's a lot of upkeep that it takes to maintain a channel. What I have in mind for the Black Label series is, for example, the one I wanted to do was It. And it would be just like this, a chapter-by-chapter rundown of the Stephen King novel It. But there would be, instead of just me talking on camera, there would be different sections of the video. There would be a whole lot more editing and things like that. I was not able to get off my butt and get it prepared. And then the word came down that Fairy Tale was coming out. So I jumped on this, and we're doing a regular read-along series. But I do want to do that It series. It's just the juice in the squeeze, man. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And it's, look, there's a lot of times making videos that feels like shouting into the void. So I hope that you understand that and allow me the space to eventually start that Black Label series, because I want that to be Black Label poetry reviews, Black Label short story reviews, and novel read-alongs, things like that. But it's going to be a whole lot more work. Russell comments, your old-timey storyteller sounds like Bill Clinton. Well, Russell, let me tell you this. I feel your pain. We're going to get through this together. Part 8 of a 32-part series. Come along with me now. Come along with me. Ava says she's going to try to catch up. Now, Ava, everyone in the class, welcome, Ava. And I am looking forward to your comments as well in the future. So, Chapter 8 of Fairy Tale by Stephen King, What Happened? Bowditch is on to Charlie. He asks Charlie if he is atoning for something. And then the screws come out of Bowditch's legs. And then Bowditch puts the screws to Charlie. He asks him, have you been playing with my gold? There's power in that gold. There's something different about it, don't you know? Also, Mr. Bowditch dies of a heart attack. Not now, not here, but we understand that eventually Bowditch is going to bite the dust, and it will be a heart attack to blame. That is what is given to us by our narrator, the trusty Charlie. Trusty Charlie sounds like a never mind. Charlie has to start carrying Radar up the steps because she is getting too old. And then on page 129, after that, Radar stopped finishing her morning and evening meals. And although I carried her up and back the steps, up the back steps, she could still go down them by herself. She started to be the occasional mess in the house. I knew Mr. Bowditch was right about no vet being able to help her, except maybe at the very end, because it was clear that she was in pain. She slept a lot, and sometimes yelped and snapped at her hind quarters, as if trying to get rid of whatever was biting her and hurting her. Now I had two patients, one getting better, one getting worse. Then Charlie decides against playing football his senior year. His dad is upset, but Mr. Bowditch is extremely angry. Then the jewelry store guy gets whacked, gets whacked off, and is dead. But fear not, consummate reader, for there is an arrest. A homeless man, homeless type, sort of, underhoused, named Benjamin Dwyer. After all, he'd tried to pawn some stuff that a homeless man, an underhoused individual, might not have, probably wouldn't have, would be way too expensive for someone like him to possess. Legally, anyway. But that night, Charlie searched the name on Twitter. Isn't this like 2013? Was that really going on in like 2013? I'm so messed up with the time frame here. But and a Bull Guy 19 tweeted on page 36, Benji Dwyer, a murder suspect? Don't make me laugh. He's been around Shittsville for 1,000 years. Should have village idiot tattooed on his forehead. So that tells you the type of individual that Benji Dwyer apparently was, and no one is buying it. Lit crit portion of the video on page 128 and 129, we get this. He was still trying to look at me in that shrewd way, left eye squinted, bushy right eyebrow raised, but smiling too. Plunged your hands into the bucket and let those pellets run through your fingers. He's talking about the gold. Yes. Now the flesh on my cheeks was burning. I hadn't just done that the first time. I'd done it several times since. The fascination of gold is something quite apart from its cash value. You know that, don't you? Yes. Let us say, just for the sake of discussion, that Mr. Heinrich talked too much to the wrong person after having too much to drink at that disgusting little bar down the street from his store. I'd bet his house and the land it sits on that old limping Willie doesn't even drink to excess, probably doesn't drink at all. But let's say. And suppose that the person he talked to, perhaps on his own, perhaps with cohorts, waited for you to leave one night, then invaded my home and demanded my gold. My gun is upstairs. My dog, once fearsome, he stroked Radar, who was snoozing beside him, is now even older than I am. What would I do in such a case? I guess give it to them? Exactly. I wouldn't wish them well, but I would give it to them. So I asked, where does it come from, Howard? I may tell you that in time. I haven't made up my mind. Because gold isn't just fascinating, it's dangerous. So, I don't have any gold. I'm not a rich guy. But I got a couple pieces of silver. Just a couple. And there really is something to it. I'm not big on this sort of thing, but it was something interesting to have. And there is an entire YouTube community of what they call silver bugs. People who this is their thing. These guys, so you can get a silver dime. Prior to 1965, dimes were 90% silver. Quarters were 90% silver. During the war years, the World War II years, nickels were 75% silver, and they've almost all toned. So they're all, you can recognize them, they're darker than most other nickels, but they also have a large mint mark centered on the obverse of the coin. So they're easier to tell that way. But the reason I bring that up, that's called junk silver. It's not an ounce. This is about 18 bucks. The books you see behind me, most of them cost more than that. However, most people bit and piece, nickel and dime their way to poverty throughout their life. The silver bugs, their strategy is, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to earn the money that I can make. And every time I get some money, I'm going to go to the coin store, and a silver dime, that 90% silver, worth about $1.25-ish, something like that. I wouldn't miss $1.25. I really wouldn't. So I'm going to go in there. If I've got $5, I'll buy 3 dimes. If I've got 15 bucks, I'll buy a quarter and a couple dimes. And they just amass. If I've got the 20 spot, I'll buy the entire ounce. You should, I implore you, look up silver collecting channels on YouTube. The extreme collections and it's almost entirely male, I don't know why, but the extreme collections that these guys put together is insane. And it's not just about the money aspect. It can't be. If it was, they wouldn't be so serious about it. If it was, they would find other ways to expedite growth of their money. This doesn't really spike in value, doesn't really go up in value. Essentially, what they say these are is a hedge against inflation. So what that means is 1964, the last year that that dime was 90% silver. 1964, a gallon of gas cost about 10 cents. Today, a gallon of gas does not cost 10 cents. It costs many, many multiples of 10 cents. But if you had that silver dime and you sold it as silver, it would get you a third of a gallon of gas, right? As opposed to 10 cents of gas, which is just breathing in the fumes. It is a hedge against inflation in that way. It is not something that someone uses to build wealth, but it does feel a whole lot more like wealth than a stock certificate. It does feel a whole lot more like wealth than your fiat currency. That's another what do they call it? Vocabulary word from those guys. They love to throw around the phrase fiat currency. It's fascinating stuff. And it really is the sort of building block sort of towards accruing wealth is saving what you've got, right? Preservation of wealth. Whatever that wealth is, if that starts with a $1.25 to buy a silver dime or whatever it is, you start there. You start with preservation before you move on to acquisition. But yeah, even with, so silver, let me see right now. We'll do it live. Silver to gold ratio. Here it is, October 4th, 2022. Silver to gold ratio. Okay, well, Google is being worthless right now. It is more than 16 to 1, but that is what they say the value is traditionally. 16 ounces of gold or silver to 1 ounce of gold. It is not that right now. Anyway, we'll move on. It's just an interesting point, I thought. Hobson's Choice, 132. We have the idea of having to put down radar, perhaps, having to seek out help for radar. And we are told that it is a Hobson's choice to get her help. First time I've ever heard the term Hobson's choice. So it's Wikipedia it. A Hobson's choice is a free choice in which only one thing is actually offered. The term is often used to describe an illusion that multiple choices are available. The most well-known Hobson's choice is, I'll give you a choice, take it or leave it, wherein leaving it is strongly undesirable, not particularly a choice. The phrase is said to have originated with Thomas Hobson, 1544 to 1631, a livery stable owner in Cambridge, England, who offered customers the choice of either taking the horse in his stall nearest to the door or taking none at all. That sounds like a guy who doesn't need your shit. I'll sell you a horse. Yeah, fine. You're taking this one or none at all. You're taking the closest one or you don't want a horse. That sounds like someone who is over your BS. Moving on from that, this is my final note on the Lit Crit section and sort of the first note in the writer's notes section here. It's going to be a shorter video. One of the most seductive ways to tell a story. So I mentioned in a previous video in this series that writing should feel like a vivid and continuous dream. One of the most seductive ways to pull that off is that your story should feel inevitable without necessarily feeling predictable. Now, a good way to think about this is music. When you listen to music, you don't know which note necessarily is coming next, but you have a good idea of which note is coming next because it's not going to be too different from the notes you've heard, and it's not going to be too terribly far from the note you're hearing. That's part of music theory, right? That there are certain notes which are much more likely to sound good next to other notes, like complementary colors, almost. Good storytelling works in much the same fashion. Your story should feel inevitable without feeling predictable. There are myriad ways for a story to go, but you understand when that next page feels non sequitur. Still, so if it's dangerous for the story to feel non sequitur on the next page, that is, that you have no idea where this next turn came from, so too is it dangerous for your story to feel uncompelling. So I ask you, I defy you here, where is this story going? If you have not read ahead, where is this story going? Personally, we understand that, okay, let me backtrack. We're being told very upfront that now it's time for Bowditch to die. We're told several times through here he dies. He died of a heart attack. I didn't expect the dog to outlive him. We understand the dog's nearly dead. So I can tell you that coming up, Bowditch is going to die, and we have the setup for someone to come looking for him, and we have the chapter 9 title, the thing in the shed, a dangerous place, 911, a wallet, a good conversation. So it feels like maybe it's in the next chapter or two. That's the wrong kind of inevitable. I think that's the wrong kind of inevitable. The inevitability of this story should feel like we understand the choices that Charlie is going to make, not the outside circumstances necessarily that are going to happen to him. Let me fidgeting with this. If you don't have a silver coin, you should get one, just so you understand what I mean by the fact that it's about more than the money involved, so you know what Stephen King is talking about here. But and why I spent so much time belaboring that point in this video. But feeling inevitable without being predictable is a tough task to pull off. It's not something simple, it's not something easy, but it's something that we have an entire canon of Stephen King doing. And we have an entire canon of Stephen King doing it while playing with the mystical. We have no mystical here. Not yet. Not yet. The thing in the shed sure seems to be a shot in that alley, but we're not there. There is not a thing in The Shining that feels out of place. Well, the furry. There's the furry with the, that feels a little out of place. But it's sort of in tone for the book. This book, I don't think, has a tone yet. Now, we talked about atonement earlier, but what does tone mean? This book has not set the table for what it is yet. We are 136 pages in, and there are people, like in the comments, who have made the case that they love the book. They love the book so far. They love the things that are going on. Okay, I believe you. I don't think you're lying about that. I defy you to tell me what it is you love. And maybe you can't. Okay. Maybe I don't see it. Okay. But I don't think there is a strong identity yet to this book. And Stephen King is someone who's very good at setting an identity for a book very early. Very early. Think of Carrie. Isn't in the first few pages of Carrie, don't they talk about the stone storm where the rocks came down from the clouds? That's ominous, and that's right up front. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, talking off the top of my head, haven't read the book in 6 years, I think, it is in the form of a newspaper article that happens. So it becomes something that is authoritative, right? And that sets a spooky tone for the rest of the novel. I don't know where this is going. I know where it's been because it's been the same place for about, 70 pages. Now, moving on to writer's notes. I talked last time about the sort of weird asides that Stephen King has been putting in dialogue in this book so far, but I didn't have examples. On page 124, I have the asides highlighted here. Radar is a dog. She'd shit on the front lawn of the Eiffel Tower if you let her. If you let her doesn't need to be there. It's a strange aside. She'd shit in front of the Eiffel Tower. If you let her or not, doesn't matter. Charlie, let me ask you something. All this you're doing for me, the let me ask you something doesn't need to be there. Now, I'm going to get to this in a minute because it's not the same strange aside as some of the other bits, but it's a strange aside in writing. Very, very common to hear, and I'll get to that in a minute. I get a very nice check for it every week. which I really appreciate, even if I don't always feel I'm doing enough to earn it. That's very wordy. Listen, I get a very nice check every week that I appreciate, which I really appreciate, even if I don't always feel like I'm doing enough to earn it. A little bit later on the page here. You gave me a good job, I said, and I'm grateful. I like you, even if you're grouchy, although I admit that it's a little harder then. It's just very wordy. Stephen King is getting very wordy with the dialogue. There's all these commas, but you know, commas, but if you think about it, commas, let me ask you something. Which I really appreciate, even if I don't feel like I've earned it. What is the balance? And this is a writer's question. What is the balance between verisimilitude versus entertainment? Verisimilitude being the likeness of reality reflected in art. Hemingway said that good dialogue is not real speech, it is the illusion of real speech. And honestly, if we're going to listen to anyone about people really speaking, maybe it's Papa. Hemingway had some good dialogue in his writing. Where is the line between verisimilitude and entertainment? This speech, these patterns, very real. I don't think they're very real clustered like this. You don't really hear people, especially people that know each other, qualifying all of their statements like that. But it does sound, you've heard people say all of these things before. Why do I want to read them? Why do I want to read them? So we have a couple bathroom breaks in this novel that kind of makes sense to be there. But you don't expect to read bathroom breaks in all the novels you read, do you? Those characters, I hate to break it to you, they got to tinkle. Every character you've ever read had to tinkle. We don't need it. Not in the novel. That's too much lifelikeness. Too much verisimilitude. There is not... So if that's dialogue, we could manipulate the Hemingway quote. Good story is not real life. It's the illusion of real life. We are to cram into these characters. And the reason I'm saying this is because Stephen King is completely capable of doing this. We are to take these characters and we are to meet them as the reader in the most explicitly necessary moments to the story that we're getting. We don't have to get the bathroom breaks. All of these little asides. Hey, let me ask you something. These little asides are the dialogue equivalent of bathroom breaks. You've done this for me, which I appreciate, even though I don't feel like I deserve it. That's the verbal equivalent, the dialogue equivalent of writing someone taking a leak. It's the same thing. That is all I have for this chapter. I will be back Thursday with chapter 9 of Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I hope to see you then.